To roast the GOP. That's not my style. Besides, there's nothing I can say about the GOP that Kevin McCarthy hasn't already put on tape.
Welcome back to CBS Mornings. President Biden used the White House Correspondents' Dinner to poke fun at his political opponents, including House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, who was recorded saying things he had denied that he ever said. McCarthy told other GOP members of Congress after the January 6th riot that he was thinking of telling President Trump he should resign. McCarthy never got around to doing that. The audio of that conversation was obtained by Jonathan Martin and Alexander Burns of the New York Times, authors of the new book, This Will Not Pass, Trump, Biden, and the Battle for America's Future. It is published by Simon & Schuster, which, like CBS, is a division of Paramount Global. Now, the book covers the 2020 election, the assault on the Capitol, and President Biden's first year in office. And it is deeply reported based on hundreds of interviews, documents, and, yes, recordings. And the authors are with us now. Jonathan, Alex, thank you very much for being here. Congratulations on the book. I would like to say congratulations to our country, but I can't because the book paints a very disturbing picture of where we are. And the recordings are part of that story. Yes. So, Jonathan, what was it like listening to not just that snippet that's been played a million times, but hours and hours of Republican leaders talking very candidly?
You know, for 5 years in Washington, there's been this conversation to the effect of, you know, in private, the Republicans really can't stand Donald Trump. And you ought to hear what they say behind closed doors. What we do in this book is pull back the curtain. We tell readers, we tell anybody who buys the book, this is what they actually think about Donald Trump. Here is that private conversation that you've heard about, and here it is in black and white. And here it is on tape. And it reflects the gulf, the vast gulf between the actual views of the GOP leaders about Trump and the views among voters toward him. They're two very different things. Party leaders, the old guard, they can't stand Donald Trump. They want him to move off the stage. They want to nominate somebody else in 24. They believe he's one of the only things that's undermining their chances politically. And as you guys know, most of the voters in the GOP are just fine with Donald Trump. They still retain a lot of affection for him. That gulf is unsustainable.
I missed the part, though, Alex, where you got the recordings from.
Well, we're certainly not going to share that news.
I missed that part.
I want to know, are there more recordings coming?
Yes, I do, too.
Look, we have an enormous amount of primary source material in this book. And one of the challenges in telling a story as big as the one that we tell in the book is trying to unpack all of that with, frankly, a limited amount of space. And when you're teasing the publication of a book, when you're trying to share your material, even in a pretty long excerpt in the New York Times, you can only share so much of it. So we're still trying to figure out what to do with that huge trove of material, which, by the way, is not just about Republicans. People are loving the Kevin McCarthy material if they don't like Kevin McCarthy. But, this is not a book that goes easy on Joe Biden and his party either.
No, that's what I think is the beauty of the book, guys, is that you do a deep dive on both parties. You reveal that both parties have issues. I mean, it seems very, very fact-based. But neither party seems to acknowledge, you know what, we got problems in River City here. They're so busy blaming the other as opposed to looking inward.
It's something that Jonathan and I talk about almost every day, is that these two parties, and I think the book shows this really vividly, these two parties are almost in a competition to see who can do a better job of keeping the other one in business, right? That when the leaders of both parties are behind closed doors, they will acknowledge, as you hear with Kevin McCarthy, but other folks, including on the Democratic side, like, we have got some real big problems here, and we have some extreme forces in our party. We've got to do something about it. The two parties aren't identical. But they've got some big problems.
I do want to stick with Kevin McCarthy for just a second, because I think for the average person reading this book, it shows them something about politics that they may not understand, that I don't understand. So you've got McCarthy in that private recording saying, I've had it with this guy, referring to President Trump. And then in the same month, just a few weeks later, he's in a picture with the president, basically giving a thumbs up. So how do you make sense of those two?
Well, so we have an entire chapter that really captures week by week what we call that rowback, how people like Kevin McCarthy, Mitch McConnell, went from denouncing Trump in such harsh terms after January 6th to sort of returning to, in some ways, to his good graces.
You called it a head-snapping reversal.
A head-snapping reversal. And the reason is pretty straightforward. McCarthy wants to be Speaker of the House, and that is his paramount goal. And he looks around his caucus, and they just don't care what Donald Trump did on January 6th. They're more concerned about what their voters think, and their voters are just fine with Donald Trump. And once McCarthy figures that out, I've got to be where the caucus is. He goes back to the caucus and says, we're not going to impeach Trump. And in fact, we're going to patch things up with Trump. And before January is out, McCarthy is down at Mar-a-Lago posing for that now famous picture with him.
Do you think the voters really don't care, though?
I think on the
think that?
Republican side, there's a willingness to sort of ignore or at least set aside concerns about January 6th and certainly Donald Trump's conduct. That's the polarized moment that we're in, and that's why it's so sobering. I mean, this moment in American politics is really concerning. We cover a lot of Congress in this book. I can just tell you guys, there is an era of extreme tension in the Congress right now. It's almost an era of menace. Right. There's concern about more physical violence. The members distrust each other. January 6th had a lasting impact on that institution.
Does a Donald Trump endorsement still hold the same weight?
I think it depends case by case. Look at Ohio tomorrow, where there's a primary for the Senate. It obviously helped J.D. Vance. It's not a small thing in a GOP primary, but it's not necessarily something that's going to ensure victory. Because there's other states, for example, like in Georgia, where Trump's biggest vengeance target is Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, who wouldn't help him steal the election. And Brian Kemp right now is in pretty good shape against David Perdue, who's the hand-picked candidate against Brian Kemp there. So it varies by state.
And it really gets to the bet that Republican congressional leaders, particularly Mitch McConnell, made after January 6th, which is that over time, Donald Trump will fade of his own lack of momentum, right? And we're about to see in primary season a real test of that strategy. It's pretty clear at this point that Trump can't just personally anoint candidates in every state and district and race in the country. But the real tell, and again, this is part of the backdrop for the whole story of the book, is that even the candidates who Trump isn't endorsing are running on his ideas and emulating his style of politics, and that's a version of controlling the party, even if you're not running with his.
You're right that people say one thing publicly and another thing privately, and maybe the voters here don't care, but the world is certainly, as you say in the book, looking at us very differently after January 6th, aren't they?
It's one of the things that we heard over and over again. We spoke to some foreign leaders, foreign diplomats. For the book, we talked to a lot of members of Congress who have been overseas over the last year, and they say that just at every turn they get asked, is the United States really okay? Yeah. And they can't really answer a confident yes to that.
And talk about,
you couldn't either in the book either.
And talk about sobering, talking to people like Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of the UK, Malcolm Turnbull from Australia, and they're asking us, is America still America? Are you guys going to be okay? Because the world depends on America. America is the anchor country.
How did you answer that question, Jonathan?
We're not sure. It remains to be seen, but our reporting in the book doesn't give us a lot of confidence. But here's the good news. Ultimately, this is the hand of the American people. The voters control our destiny, and they're going to be able to make choices in 22 and 24. But after reading this book, they're going to have eyes wide open.
The president was still very optimistic at the dinner, which we expect him to be, but he was very optimistic and very confident about where we're heading.
A lot of nervous people in Washington want to know if there's more recordings. Want to let them rest easy this morning?
No, we do not. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
All right.
I didn't catch where'd you get those recordings?
Sorry, Washington. Sorry, Washington. No good sleep ahead. Jonathan Martin and Alexander Burns, thank you guys very much. Appreciate it. The book is called This Will Not Pass, and it goes on sale tomorrow.
Coming up next.